Hello everyone, Jeff and Jay here with another edition of Jay's Big Adventure, Jay's Fuzzy Guy. And today we are starting on another adventure that unfortunately includes selling our 2003 BMW M3. Now we've had this car for 3 years, bought it out of a Cadillac store in Nashville, Tennessee. It got traded in on an Escalade and they had no idea what to do with the car with 3 pedals, and it was almost 15 years old. And so when I saw the car online, all it had was a description of the car, 03 M3, 6-speed manual, and you can never trust that because they think the SMG is a 6-speed manual. Well, because it is, but that's a whole separate issue. Anyway, no color, no description of any kind, just the year, make, model, and miles. So I went, okay. So I called the guy, and I said to him, at 54,000 miles, car should be in pretty good shape. He goes, dude, it is like new. Except for the normal rock chips on the front of the car, it's perfect. So I jumped on a plane and I bought it. It wasn't quite that easy. Ended up being a little bit more of a story than I had originally intended, but got the car home. We've enjoyed it for 3 years, and now it is time to move on. So without beating a dead horse, I do want to go through at least a little bit of history so I understand a little bit more about what M3s are all about if you're new to the channel or if you're new to BMWs. And the M3 started in 1986 in Europe. We got just a few cars in 1987. And for the most part, 1988 to 1991 is when all of the M3s were sold in the country. I think there were 4,997 sold in the US, 15,000 just under 15,000 worldwide. And we got a 2.3 liter 4-cylinder engine, made 193 horsepower in the US, and that car set the automotive world on its ear. It was what was called a homologation special, and it was intended to be used for the World Touring Car Championship. So to do that, they needed to make some changes. First of all, they needed to widen the fenders so they could get bigger tires under it. You see those on the original M3s. They increased the angle of the back glass, they added the rear wing, new front spoiler, 5 lug wheels, whole bunch of stuff to make the car better for racing. Then they had to sell so many examples of that for it to be homologated. In any case, that car set the automotive world on its ear. And it started the process of getting the BMW M cars known in the marketplace. They ran the E30 M3 in the US from 1987 to 1991. And then there was a gap. And they didn't bring out another M3 until 1995. That's the E46 edition. Now, the E36 is kind of a bastard child. It does not have the fancy bodywork. It does not have a true M engine, which is individual throttle bodies for each cylinder. It was definitely a stopgap measure. They upgraded the seats, upgraded the suspension, tires, wheels, brakes, those sorts of things. But the bodywork was very similar to a regular E36 car, just front bumper cap and those sorts of things. But that car put the M3 on the map. The original M3 was an enthusiast car. Very few people knew what it was. Very few people wanted to deal with it on a regular basis because of its high-strung 4-cylinder engine. And the E36 car, you could drive on a daily basis. It wasn't that temperamental. It was significantly more user-friendly on a regular basis, and it was 240 horsepower. Even though that car is debated whether it's a real M car because of its lack of engine tuning that normally is done with M cars, including the intake. What that car did is it set the precedent for a BMW M3 to be a real contender to the throne. And now all of a sudden you had a car that would run with a 911, it would run with a Corvette, and it got people into the market that would not have gotten there otherwise. The M3 had real back seats, it comes in a convertible, and so that car served its purpose, and they sold a ton of those cars. They made coupes, they made convertibles, they made sedans, and very, very definitely a car that was needed in the marketplace to create this car. This is back to the original M formula, which is individual throttle bodies. This now has a 6-speed transmission, fender flares, completely different suspension, steering wheels, brakes, everything that moves basically from the fan all the way to differential is different, including a real limited slip differential, not just traction control. This car is going to go down in history as the last of an era. The next generation, the E90 series cars, were a V8, and it's not the original formula for an M car, which is a high winding, low displacement engine, and so that I think is going to hurt that car. The E90 series M3s are another step up the food chain, which is both good news and bad news. It's now a V8, still has an 8,000 RPM redline, individual throttle bodies that the E36 did not have, but they've gotten continually heavier and heavier, and they're getting further and further away from the formula that made the M3 special to begin with, and that is lightweight and balance. In the convertibles in particular, the E90 M3s are a hardtop. And not only is a hardtop extremely complex, it's heavy where you don't want the weight, and it destroys your trunk volume when the top is down. So I definitely did not want one of those. I was looking for a cloth top. I wanted the inline six. This is the option. This is the way to go. And because of that, this is the car that I think is going to appreciate the quickest, because it has all those attributes of the original M cars without all the additional weight and filtering that came in the later ones. So what is it that makes these cars so special? It's really kind of hard to define, but once you experience it, you'll know it right off the bat. There is a directness to the controls. Ooh, here's a couple of deer here coming by. There's a directness to the controls that you just don't find in modern cars. The steering is just perfectly weighted. So many cars have gone to electric steering and they're super over boosted, and it just really hurts the steering feel, especially when you're going quickly. So what is it that makes these cars so special? It's a lot of things, really, but I guess one of the easiest ways to try to wrap your head around what makes them unique is the lack of filtering. In modern cars, the throttle is controlled by the computer, the brakes are controlled by the computer, you've got traction control and stability control and all this stuff going on, and every layer changes your command between you doing something and the car responding. I guess that's the easiest way to look at it. If you look at a modern Nissan GT-R or the new Acura NSX, you're not commanding the car to do something, you're requesting it. And that's not what I want. You know, if I want 10% more throttle, I want 10% more throttle right now, please. I don't want the car to try to figure out if what I really wanted was 10%. Same thing with braking, same thing with the steering. It's just there's filtering going on that changes what I asked for between when I asked for it and what the car does. That, especially when you're going quickly, is a huge problem. This is why race cars don't have all the nannies, is because the car doesn't know what's coming like the driver does, and that extra filtering is not good for you. If you look at it, the Nissan GT-R or an NSX, those cars are designed to make you look like you're a better driver than you are. That's not what I want. The E30 M3 is probably the most direct of the M3s. It is. But it doesn't have a lot of horsepower, which in this altitude is a problem. But I like the fact that, I mean, an E30 M3, you could have the car 89.9 degrees to the direction of travel, and it's still a savable slide. You know, the suspension's not that sophisticated. It's not the 5-link that's on this thing. but man, is it predictable, and you can go really, really hard on a road you don't know because of that predictability. And grip is a double-edged sword. The harder the car grips, the harder it's going to break free when you run out of traction. The lower the profile the tire is, the quicker that transition is going to be. So you get a modern car with a really sophisticated suspension and really grippy tires, and man, when they start to slide, it's really hard to catch. This car, I think, is one of the best compromises. It has the 5-link suspension. It's really supple over bumps, but it's still pretty savable. You can slide this around without a lot of difficulty. The other part of it is that these tires are, in the grand scheme of things, not that wide. They're 255s. The fronts are only 225, 45, 18s. So you've got a little bit of sidewall, a little bit of cushion, and you get a little bit of warning before the car ends up being sideways. Again, in the grand scheme of things, what I look for in a car is balance. Is not does it do one thing well, but does it do a lot of things well. Great track car, even with a convertible. Yes, the coupes are faster, they're 400 pounds lighter, I get that. But this is still a really entertaining car on a racetrack, and you can run it hard all day without running out of brakes, without having cooling issues. And then you can drive it every day to work for the next 9 months and not feel like you're getting beaten up, and that's hard to find. This car has back seats. Find another car that is this capable with room for 4 and a manual transmission. That's a big deal. I don't want a Mercedes. I don't want to go to something with flapping paddles, because I want that third pedal. That's important to me. What other cars are out there? I mean, not many. And regardless of whether you put this car at the top of the world's best drivers' cars, it's going to be on the list. It's only a matter where you rank it. And that's really the hard part, is if you look at more focused cars like a 911 or an Ariel Atom, or a Lotus Elise, any of those cars, you give up so much on a daily basis to have that little bit more performance that most people can't use. Okay, let's be clear about this. When this car goes to the track, the car is not the limiting factor. Okay, I have 15,000 racetrack miles under my belt. It's still not the limiting factor. I love these corners. These great big sweepers, 80 miles an hour or so. Messed that shift up. But that's what it comes down to, is balance. I don't want a car that's easy to drive. Okay, I don't want to play a Nintendo game in real life. I want something that's challenging, something that makes me work for it. This car, it's pretty quick, but it's not going to come easy. I can't just turn the boost up and go, okay, here's 500 pound-feet of torque. Doesn't matter what gear I'm in, doesn't matter how fast I'm going. What this car does. So you need to be in the right gear. You have to have your line set if you're going to go quickly. And that challenge is what makes it rewarding. I use the parable of the golf gun. if I could buy a golf gun that would make a hole-in-one every time I pulled the trigger, it would be really fun for about 5 holes. And that wouldn't be fun anymore, because there was no effort to get it. If you get to be a scratch golfer, you've accomplished something. That's something that's hard to do. Not many people get to that level. Same thing with driving a car. If you can double clutch and run a car like this down a winding road quickly and safely, there are not many people can do that. And I love getting a hold of people in way more expensive cars and just blowing them off because I actually know how to drive it. But that's what makes these cars unique. Every successive generation, this is true of all cars, not just the M3s. They get faster in a straight line, they get more removed from the driving process, and ultimately they're just not fun to drive unless you're going really, really, really fast. And you can't always do that. You know, I'm fortunate I'll live in an area where this is kind of my home office. A lot of people don't have access to these kind of roads, so now all of a sudden slogging around in the city, you might as well be in your little pod car because it doesn't matter. This is just magic. It's just effortless. And that's the other thing. Any moron can bolt coilovers onto a car and screw the handling up, hoping that it's going to be faster. May feel faster, may actually not be. This is a car that's completely usable on a daily basis. I can go out to lunch, I can go out on a date. It's quiet, it's smooth, the air conditioning works. And then I can go off on a day like today. It's just magic. I really hope the audio turns out on this. Because it's just truly magic. There's nothing else like this. And that's what makes them special. If you haven't driven one, you need to before they get too expensive, because they're headed that direction. If you can, do it on a road like this. Alright, so we're just going to use an inexpensive paint meter to see exactly how consistent this paint is. Six. This could be a little more difficult with the camera, but let's see if we can make this work. 6, 7, 8, 7, 8, 7, 6, 6, 7. Let's see whether this will show again. 7, 7, 8, 8, 8, 8, 9, 6.